Welcome to the Top Tier Podcast, where we talk about what's actually happening in college athletics, NIL, athlete development, and the future of sports. I'm Journey Amundsen, Top Tier NIL COO, and today I'm joined by Cara Bognar, founder and CEO of Top Tier NIL. Welcome, Cara. It's so nice to have you.
Absolutely, and couldn't be more excited to chat with you today, Journey.
Me too. I'm super excited. So, Cara, as you know, there's a lot of noise in the NIL landscape right now. So, before we dive deep into those big conversations, let's start with a simple question. What is top tier NIL and how does it fit into the NIL landscape?
Absolutely, and Top Tier NIL, we are a revenue generation solution for universities, all through athlete-led camps, clinics, and lessons. So we work with players across the country to make sure that they're able to monetize their own NIL through in-person events, such as these camps that we handle everything from venue to payment to scheduling and safety, all to find a way to create equitable access.
What is that gap that you found in the market to create top tier NIL that knew where you knew you needed something different?
When NIL first came out, it was a lot of what we see typically as major brand deals or merchandising. So, really, what that has to do is like Gatorade can come in and pay an athlete to go ahead and create a social post. What we realized is that there was a huge gap for about 99% of athletes who maybe didn't have those social media followings or didn't come from a sport that had that top 1% of fan base. And so we built top tier NIL to make sure that all athletes across the country would be able to monetize themselves without forcing them to learn a new skill or changing anything within the department.
So that's really surprising to me, and probably to a lot of people, because when I think of NIL, I think of athletes earning that top dollar. What is your lived experience with that? I hear you might have been a college athlete. Tell me about your first journey into NIL.
I was a college athlete. You were right there. I was a swimmer at the University of Illinois. And NIL actually came out when I was in the middle of my career. So I had the lived experience of getting to see the pre NIL, what that looked like on a college campus, to the early days before we even had this new house settlement and what it was just at the very start when almost the collective era. And so for me, it was all built through lived experience and understanding that this is truly what college athletes are going. And I think that there is a major misconception
Yeah.
when we talk about college athletes and we hear that they are earning top dollar.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them absolutely are, but a ton of the market still isn't. You still have D2, D3, you have mid-major Division 1, you have Olympic sports, you have even women's sports across the board who aren't getting the same rev share that other sports are with that. And so the way that we see it is that NIL has a huge opportunity to continue
Yes.
to grow, but it might not be through the same lens that we have looked at it over the last 4 years.
Yeah, totally. And I know you know this, but I also was a college athlete. So I had that same experience being a D3 athlete and then also being at that mid-major Division 1 level. NIL was not what it cracked out to be. And so I'm so excited that you've created top tier NIL to bridge that gap. And so speaking of, tell me about how you started top tier NIL. What was the origin story? What did it look like? Because you started top tier NIL while you were still a college athlete.
I was, and that was chaos, to be honest with you, but so much fun across the board. And couldn't have done it with the help of my teammates, my school, the university that supported us throughout the entire journey. So I started it really in my sophomore going into junior year. And we originally were a pure lessons platform. So, how do we help athletes monetize their skills? We realized let's do this through lessons. So we started out with the help of the local park district. We did some swim lessons. My teammates and I, we were all out there in the water coaching
Yeah.
kids across the board. And we had a huge opportunity to start in the Champaign-Urbana community and impact really hundreds of little kids across the city to be able to teach them how to swim, to help them get to that next level, make that state championship, and just continue to grow that across the board. So that was really the earliest days. We were young, testing things out, trying things across the board, and we built everything. We didn't even have a technology platform back then. We just
Yeah.
went out there, talked to customers, found consumers, and found a way to actually bring real value into the ecosystem and pay players while we were at it.
Yeah, totally. And back then, top tier lessons, you've really grown so much since then. Now being top tier NIL, you've seen these college athletic departments grow and change. What did that transition from top tier lessons to top tier NIL look like? What did you see in the college sports landscape that made you make that transition?
A lot of our transition was spurred by something called the house settlement,
Mm-hmm.
and that came out last summer. And what that did is it allowed schools to pay players directly. So before we had schools working with third-party collectives to find different ways to be able to pay players for doing work in the local community. But now with the passing of the settlement, schools are able to actually pay players directly themselves. They don't need a third
Yeah.
party to go ahead and do it.
Crazy.
And that was crazy because now each school was capped at about $20 million across the board. And we saw an opportunity to be able to actually help the schools now that they're having to pay players or working to play players, which is incredible in the space, but either recoup some of those dollars or
Yeah.
find a new way of generating revenue that doesn't add operational infrastructure or monetary burden on them, and instead is something that's just pure upside to allow them
Right.
to generate revenue and build their community.
That's really cool. You touched on this a little bit about how now college athletic departments are having to recoup that revenue. What problems are college athletic departments facing right now? Like, for those who don't know, those who don't work in college sports, we watch them on our TV all the time. We know and love the players and the teams, but what's actually happening behind the scenes?
So college sports is shifting almost into more of a professional environment.
Yeah.
Now that schools can go ahead and pay players, they're bringing that in, and that's a piece of the budget that last year they were using internally.
Gotcha.
And this year they're now paying players. And absolutely, it's an amazing thing. We 100% want players to be paid for the work that they are putting in, but it creates a divide in the world of schools. You have some mid-major D1s who don't have enough revenue. They don't have enough dollars to be able to make it to that $20 million cap. But they're still trying to compete with the major top, like Power 4 schools
Yeah.
who have more money. But for the Power 4 schools, there's something called NIL Go, which what that does is it essentially enforces that any dollar that goes outside of that 20 million is something that we call real NIL, which means it's market value, it has a real consumer backed behind it, and it is something that is now verified and checked.
Yes.
So for those schools, they're trying to be able to give players more opportunity, more money, more revenue, more just ability to be able to be out in the community. And to do that, they have to find new ways to generate revenue, something called third party outside of the revenue share cap.
Gotcha. Okay. That is something that I think is creating a lot of confusion for people outside of the college sports landscape. And even inside of athletic departments right now, they are having to be very creative, coming up with new ways to mitigate all of this new burden and changes going on. So what does top tier NIL do to help college athletic departments? Give us a behind the scenes look of, I've heard a little bit, and we can dive deeper later into also how top tier NIL affects athletes specifically and young kids in the community. But how does it work to work with top tier NIL as a college athletic department?
Of course. So when we work with athletic departments, we actually come in and we host quarterly sports camps for every single sport across
That's
campus.
so cool.
It is an amazing job to have. And what we do there is we handle everything. We invest in the schools to be able to create this ecosystem, and we bring the capital needed to be able to start this from the ground up. The reason why we do this is because we want to create a revenue generation ecosystem that benefits players. So everything's done through revenue split. Everything is done in a way that increases opportunities for the community, fan engagement. It's amazing to look at a sport like softball that maybe isn't going to have the same fan base that football is coming to purchase tickets.
Yeah.
But there's a larger fan base of 11 to 12-year-old little girls who want nothing more than to interact with those players and be able to understand, what is it like to be a Division I player? What is it like to be a Division II player, an NAIA player, everything across the board? And so we're able to come in and handle the entire operational setup of these camps, from the insurance, the venue, payment processing, customer support, even having top-tier staff on the ground
That's crazy.
at these camps for every sport on campus. And it's just a new way of how do we build real value into the schools? How do we create opportunities to increase fan engagement and retain the players on campus as well?
It just sounds like such a great opportunity for college athletic departments, for athletes. It's something that I would have loved to do as a college athlete, being able to engage in the community in that way and build these relationships that, get to impact me, but also be an inspiration for that next generation of athletes. So all of your work, Cara, is so incredible, and I'm just so excited to see what is coming next. For those universities and athletic departments, what is on the horizon? How do you think that they can stay ahead of the curve in this NIL landscape? You mentioned a lot of changes. Give the athletic departments out there some advice of how to be at the forefront of all of the change that's coming.
Universities have to stay innovative. if you're sticking to what's traditionally been done, following the stereotypical nonprofit model that we have all seen over the last 20, 30 years,
Yeah.
you're going to get left behind. And that's the real fact of it. And the way that they're being innovative is finding new ways to actually generate the revenue in the community. So universities have so many existing assets, whether that's real estate, whether that's facilities, whether that's the athletes themselves, who each one of them are these amazing marketable brands that NIL has allowed us to continuously unlock and allowed the athletes to be able to monetize themselves. But for a university, they have to find different ways to be able to generate revenue from what they already have without adding, an infrastructure cost, without adding operational burden. That's why we've seen even private equity coming in and starting to invest in athletic programs, starting to see the value as these schools continue to move forward and build a larger and larger market across.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I hope that for all the college athletic administrators out there listening, they take a page out of your book, because we've watched you iterate and grow top tier NIL to be something that can truly benefit athletic departments all across the country. Okay, so speaking of the changing NIL landscape, I know we've talked about it a lot. One thing that is on the forefront of my mind, I know just came out kind of in the past week here, is when the NCAA Division I cabinet unanimously ruled and voted to implement the new 5-year collegiate athlete eligibility, or the 19th birthday rule. So for those of you that don't know, this is changing where red shirts are going away. College athletes now have 5 years to compete in their sport no matter what. At the start of their collegiate athletic experience, or if they haven't turned 19, or at the start of their 19th birthday yet, whichever is earlier. Where do you see this changing the transfer portal, how college athletic departments are maneuvering during this time? This is, brand new ruling, so we'll see what's going to happen in the next couple of months here. But what are your thoughts on how this might affect college sports?
I think a lot of this is done to keep the amateurism within college sports and make sure that, yes, while we are creating new opportunities to pay players, it is still there and still has the same bones of what does it mean to be a student athlete and not just an athlete who's playing at a semi-professional level who happens to be around the college age and taking a couple classes. And so the big things for athletic departments, and especially for new recruits coming in, is with that 5-year eligibility window, it is going to create a little bit more competition for roster slots.
Sure.
We've already seen roster sizes go down.
Yeah.
We've already seen caps on there. So now that you're extending it, and yes, people absolutely redshirt across the board, but now everyone has a 5-year window is very different than what we've stereotypically seen across the landscape. On top of that, I think it will actually help a little bit with the transfer portal.
Okay.
Making sure that we have some limits on that, making sure that it's not every single year just a complete grab on, hey, this is how the financial market swings this way, and so we're going to move here and move there. I do still believe in a little bit of the beauty of college sports is the fact that you have this team around you, you have a camaraderie. There's really no environment like being part of a college sports team.
I miss it.
It's really amazing. We're all FOMO here as former college athletes, but the loyalty that you have, and we see this even, I'd say more so than NFL, NBA, WNBA teams across the country, people have so much loyalty to their sports teams. And now with NIL, it's not just loyalty to the team, but loyalty to players, now that the players have the opportunity to tell their story. So I do hope that this ruling will actually help across the board with keeping people in great places to allow them to build better brands, better NIL, and make sure that we have those opportunities across the board for the players to finish out their degrees and make sure that they're doing everything they can across the board to be not just the best athletes, but the best people, the best students, and the best future professionals as well.
I love that, and I really hope so. I mean, that's part, I think, of what all of us love about college sports is the community, feeling that ownership and the loyalty to your team and watching that team grow from coming in as young 18, 19-year-olds and leaving as young adults. So I totally agree, and I hope we continue to see these positive changes in the college sports landscape. And now all of this community building, hopefully, and the loyalty is going to stay at the forefront of athletic departments' minds, at the forefront of community minds. How do you see an external partner like Top Tier NIL fitting into that landscape?
I think retention is a major piece of how third-party partners can go ahead and help. There's so much to do in the world of NIL. It's overwhelming for any one department to be able to figure out rev share and then rev generation, and then what are all the different ways that you can actually pull this in? Is that real estate? How does that actually work? And I think these third-party partners have the ability to alleviate some of those major demands, staffing demands, problems with that have a lot of incentive to specialize in one thing, to be exceptional at one segment, and allow that to really work well. And so when we go back to retention and we look at what does it mean for an athlete, because the transfer portal, it can be a great thing, it can be a scary thing, especially depending on who you are, depending on what department you are. It can be opportunity, but it can also be a way that your entire roster can be wiped in a span of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so we've seen everything across the board. And so while people are very focused on maybe what is that monetary value or what can we pay a player coming in, I think it's equally important to focus on what's the experience of a player at the school.
Yeah.
So, like, where are they engaging with the community? What's building that fan loyalty, not just for the fans to the player, but to the player to the fans?
Yes.
There's nothing more amazing than running out into a stadium or a court or a field and getting to hear the roar of people who are so excited and rooting for you. And I think that brings us down to everything from academic development to professional development to opportunities like top tier NIL that get you involved and make sure that you're more than just a player on a screen.
Right.
You're a human, you're a person, you get those interactions, you have those opportunities. And so I'd encourage athletic departments to actually lean on third-party solutions that benefit them, benefit players. Make sure that you're doing things that work really, really well for everyone in the ecosystem and are a big benefit to what actually happens in your department. But I would also encourage to stay innovative, to try new things, to not be opposed to testing something out, because that's really what's going to help you lead the charge and make sure that your players are loving to come to your school. And not just that, but staying in your school.
Yeah, retention is something that I know I'm hearing a lot of talk of in these teams and in athletic departments. So I'm just excited for what top tier NIL is bringing to these departments, and exactly what you were talking about, how these athletes are able to really feel like they are a part of the community and not just an untouchable player on a screen, especially when you and I know, have traveled to places like Santa Clara University or Boise State University, these really innovative schools that we've been lucky enough to partner with, and seeing their fans come and interact with their teams has been so special. From working with even the men's basketball teams that I know sometimes can feel like they are a little pulled away from the community engagement piece, and seeing them work with young kids. And the Olympic sports too, and the sports that traditionally are not earning all of the same revenue as some of those traditional revenue driving sports like football and basketball. So as Olympic sport athletes, I was track and field, you were a swimmer. How do you see the Olympic sports being affected by this changing NIL landscape? And maybe talk about a little bit about what could top tier NIL do to help these Olympic sports as well.
So it is true that there are some resources that can be pulled away from Olympic sports. We have seen that at certain programs.
Yeah.
We've also seen certain programs actually pull more resources into Olympic sports.
Interesting.
Now that they've had that, whether that be scholarships across the board, we've seen a huge increase of those at a lot of Power 4 institutions. And so there's been great things and bad things, as any new legislation will create this differential there. But I think the major thing is when universities are thinking about revenue generation, when they're thinking about what are the new ways that they can actually monetize the department, monetize the players, don't forget about Olympic sports.
Yes.
Maybe it's not the tickets. Maybe it's not the normal ways that we have typically thought about as major revenue drivers for universities. But what we've found at top tier NIL is a lot of our Olympic sports, a lot of our women's sports actually generate more revenue. They're a huge market there, especially in the youth sports space, where we think that what's coming next isn't necessarily ticketing for these events, for these sports, but it is experiences.
Right.
And that's top dollar. That's very different from what it looks like. The youth sports market in swimming, for example, is absolutely massive.
Totally.
And you're starting early, you're starting young. Every kid needs to learn how to swim. It's the only sport that actually saves lives. And so there's huge untapped potential to not just look at college sports as pure college athletics. We go to a game, we buy a ticket, moving forwards. But as a full ecosystem that involves everything from youth sports to college sports, leading into professional sports, bringing in digital media, merchandising, player cards, everything like that across the board. And so I think there is huge opportunity to actually start building a bridge that puts Olympic sports in a way that's starting to move towards a revenue generating team instead of just one that has a red line on the budget.
I'm really glad that, top tier NIL and all of these new changing NIL landscapes and initiatives are able to bring all of that incredible, not just money but also opportunities to Olympic sports. And one big thing in the news, in addition to Olympic sports, is women's sports and how this NIL landscape is really leaning in favor of women's sports a lot of the time. So, what are those growth strategies? What do you see on the horizon for women's sports as a whole? I mean, that is a really big question. So maybe let's first think about even in the collegiate sports landscape. Where do you see that going?
I think the rise of women's sports can be partially attributed to NIL.
Really?
I
That's
really
so cool.
do. Because what NIL did in the earliest days was it gave people a reason to tell their stories. Before NIL, even for telling your story, there was no way you could monetize it. You really couldn't build that brand, that following that you wanted to, that gave the incentive behind doing it. So then with NIL that came out, women's across the country, especially in college sports, started looking at this and saying, hey, I have an incredible story to tell. I had 2 injuries. We were talking with someone just the other day.
Yes.
2 injuries, playing basketball, now a Division I college rower, doing incredible things across the world. But that's a story worth sharing. And it's a story that tons of kids, parents, athletes can also relate to.
Of course.
And I think women have just shown that there's a huge just initiative towards finding new ways, towards hustling, towards getting deals, towards going ahead and creating the narrative that needs to be done. And I think that's done really, really well with the rise of social media as it continues to move forward. We have more platforms to be able to share this. And, you know, we all talk about the Caitlin Clark effect, the Angel Reese, everything that Juju, that we've seen with that across the board. But a lot of these stories came out of college athletics.
Yes.
And that fan base is loyal. They transferred into where they're playing professional. They've moved forward on that way. And we've seen consumer behavior rising with that. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of the incentive behind NIL is what allowed those stories to be heard, to be shown, to be monetized, and that's what brought the fans in. People follow stories. They follow people now. People don't buy off of just a brand or a reason. They want to follow the people behind it, and that's what creates brand loyalty.
That totally makes sense. And I think that's even more important when we're talking about the retention and the loyalty that a college athlete, like you're saying, like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, they built these ecosystems around them because of their school and their college and the story that they were able to grow and show during their time competing for their respective universities. So let's talk a little bit about that local equity that college athletes like that have built. Do you see that college athletes, when they've built a community around them, does that help with the retention? Does that help them monetize their personal brand more if they're able to really engage and have the community buy in like that?
Community is everything. Community is the fundamental building block on which fan loyalty is based, on which retention builds, and on top of that, on how do you want to create something that lasts beyond you even. And
Building that legacy.
Legacy is, we talk about it all the time in college sports. It's really every head coach will sit you down and say, what legacy do you want to leave? What do you want to create for the people that come behind you? And it's true. No one remembers your times, your shots scored, your goals, anything like that. They remember the legacy that you've built because of who you are and what you did for the community. And that, I think, does encourage retention. It creates that, but I will say there is a complementary effect. So if a school has a great community that they've already built and the athlete can come in and take advantage of that community, they can build within that community. And the same thing for a school. If an athlete builds their own community, that's just more benefit to the school. And so I think it's one of those things that we need to make sure that it's going 2 ways. That the athlete is creating their own community because that's going to bring more people to games. That's going to get more people excited. That's going to build the loyalty of the fan base.
Yeah.
And at the same time, if a school can have the built-in community and, you know, you walk into that stadium and you hear the roar of 100,000 fans coming in, now that's a special experience too for the player.
Yes.
And so it's a two-way street on how can schools be working to build the community that can benefit the players, and how can players be working to build the community that benefits, yes, them as well, but the school as a whole. And I think that's the sort of mentality that most people should have coming into college sports.
So if I'm a young college athlete coming into college sports, maybe for the first time, or now I'm really thinking about building that community, building my personal brand, engaging, maybe I just want to get into NIL and learn what it is. What advice are you giving me as a young college athlete? How do I take that first step into the door?
Get involved. Go ahead, find your tribe, find your community. Start with whoever runs compliance, NIL, Depending on your school, maybe there's a dedicated position. Maybe it is just the generalized academic advisors. There could be a large scale of where that is. But sit there and talk to them. Get to know the resources that exist. From there, I'd recommend finding your niche. So do you like social media? Do you like events? Do you like camps? Do you like working with kids in the local community? And that's going to teach you where do you want to go next. If you want to do camps, I'd say come to Top Tier NIL. But truly, it's just a very different way of making sure that you learn yourself.
Yeah.
You take advantage of all the resources because they are there for you at your schools, no matter what school you're at. And on top of that, look beyond your school.
Yes.
There are platforms like there's Open Doors out there, which is an amazing NIL marketplace that allows you to connect with brands and actually get those brand deals that you hear about all the time. There's Top Tier NIL that allows you to build camps, clinics, even lessons for kids in your local community, which that doesn't even rely on social media. You can start a merchandising store of yourself. You can work with the NIL store, Campus Inc., to be able to get a t-shirt that has your name, your likeness, your photo, your number on the back of that. And that's amazing. Like, you don't see those opportunities everywhere across the board. And coming into college athletics, you can take advantage of all of that. And none of those opportunities there, do you have to be a top player? Do you have to be at a top school? You don't have to have X number of followers to be able to do that. Those are all universal opportunities for any athlete getting involved on campus.
That is so cool. I know that we have had a lot of incredible opportunities to get us here today. We've been able to use a lot of resources and have great partners to work with and propel Top Tier NIL forward, but also propel college athletics forward and specific college athletes and teams. Are there any partnerships or stories you're particularly excited about that you want to share with the audience?
I'd say the stories that excite me the most are going to be the ones of individual athletes.
Yeah.
They're going to be the ones of the people who go back to their hometowns, that we're able to set them up with everything needed to be able to run a camp for the club that raised them.
That's so cool.
It's truly amazing. Just in the last 2 months, we had one of our Stanford volleyball athletes who was incredible work with a club in the Bay Area, so around where she goes to school, and she was able to go over 2 weeks, 2 weekends, work with 2 different clubs, and make a significant amount of dollars for herself. But on top of that, I think there was probably close to 50 kids overall that she was able to work with, inspire. They were so excited. They were making TikToks with her even, which sounds hilarious. I feel old.
That's really
thinking
special
about that, but it's amazing. And then we work with Boise State, their university's athletes, through the Horseshoe Collective. And we've seen some of their players be able to go back to their hometown. I think another volleyball player in Tuba City, Arizona. And, the club that she had worked with growing up was able to give back a piece of the profits there and actually create something that lives past herself. So now, being in college, being a college athlete, you can actually have a different way that's not just giving back to the community of the school, but giving back to the community that raised you, to the club, to the high school team, to the people that you grew up with, and to any college athletes out there, you are their success story. You are one of the people that they have worked with from a young age, gotten to watch that growth. And we all grow a lot, not just physically, but mentally as well, especially in those middle school, high school years growing up. And now that you're in college, you're an inspiration to every kid who's playing. Everyone looks up to you across the board. And I think for me, it's those stories that create the impact, that find the new way that, yes, it is a monetizable NIL asset, but at the same time, it is pure benefit to the community. It creates impact. It creates stories, opportunities. It builds brands. And it feels really amazing to be an athlete getting to be involved with that.
That's so meaningful. I know I feel so lucky to be able to work with these college athletes and see them go fill their cup and, working with the next generation, but also see the athletes truly meet their heroes. I mean, that's what community is all about. And speaking of impact, let's talk about your impact, Cara. What do you want your impact, your legacy to be? Where do you see Top Tier NIL heading in these next couple of months?
We see Top Tier NIL as the NIL platform for real NIL. And what we mean by that is every athlete across the country that wants to have the ability to impact their community, to host these in-person events, to be able to work with the next generation of hopefully future college athletes, we are there every step of the way to support that. And what that means is we never want an athlete to have to put forward any monetary any money to be able to do it. We never want an athlete to have to do the setup, to handle any of the operations. The way that we work is we set up everything on the back end. So the athlete truly shows up, coaches, inspires the next generation,
That's
and
perfect.
gets to tell their Brit story. And I think that is where we want our impact to be. We want to see that across the country, every single school that exists, every player from all divisions. This is something that has equitable access. It is accessible for every player because you know as well as I do that great coaches can come from anywhere.
So true. So true. Well, thank you so much, Cara, for sharing your story and for just teaching us about how we can get engaged in our community, how we can be innovative in the college sports landscape, and chatting about the future of college sports.